Hey, thank you for coming back. Today's the episode is about revenge on assholes, suitable for sleeping, even if not for so long. By the way, I found an interesting place there at the end of the reservoir. Today, we will rather explore it. Do not delay and start the first story. Neighbor was stealing water from my supply, so I ruined him. I live in Asia and just purchased a new house. Now, the previous owners were family friends who needed cash urgently and haven't been living in my country for nearly 3 years. So I got it for a great price in the middle of the capital city. The sale was finalized at the start of this month and I moved in right after. The house was definitely a fixer-upper, as the previous owners had left mid-renovation and the main door was locked with just a padlock, not even a door lock. The house had no gate, meaning anyone could just walk right on in. The first day I moved in, someone's bike was parked in the garage. I just parked it on the road on the same day I had a gate installed. An angry man was knocking on my gate later and I didn't bother answering. But through my window, I could see him giving up and taking the bike after 15 minutes. So already, I wasn't digging the neighborhood, but I didn't have any incidents after that. Aside from people not knowing that this was no longer an abandoned house, so my gate was blocked more often than never, but a no parking sign on my gate fixed that issue. Last week, I was having a shower in my bathroom and I noticed my water pressure was lower than usual. I also heard my next door neighbor's water pump going. Now, this neighbor, an old guy, lived in a 3-storied house, the first being the lowest and the one he lived in. The other 2 floors were rented out to tenants. This guy wasn't happy about the house being sold and voiced many concerns to my friends, the previous owners. He was super angry about it, and my friends did warn me, but I'm a 6-foot guy with 3 dogs. No way he was doing anything, and yep, he didn't. So with this living situation, a water pump is needed to pump water to the tanks on the roof, since the public supply's pressure is not enough to get it up 3 stories. Now, I heard the water pump going and immediately was suspicious. Sure, coincidences exist, but it wouldn't hurt to check it out. I waited till his pump turned off and then turned on different taps in the house. Sure enough, the pressure was back to normal. This made me even more suspicious, but if he was stealing water, it also made sense. The water bills had been going up over the years. This house wasn't lived in, but the house also had some water leaks. So it was chalked up to that, even if the bills were too high to be caused just by leaks. Now it's starting to make sense. At some point in the last 3 years, this old miser thought he'd save the cost of paying for water and waltzed into the property and is siphoning water from my lines. I couldn't find where exactly he was siphoning water from, but after checking my pressure multiple times, I was pretty sure. So I sat on it for a few days, thinking if I should confront him, go the legal path, or just let it be. Now, water in my country is very cheap. My total bill, even with washing 3 animals, a car every week, and watering my garden only costs like $5 per month, even with the neighbor also stealing some of it. But it wasn't about how much I was paying or who was paying for it. It's about entitled old people who think that they're deserving of using other people's resources without paying for it and then getting away with it. It didn't sit right with me, and I really wanted to teach him a lesson. What I did was really simple. I just turned off my water from the mains. I wouldn't have to break into his property, nor would I be breaking any laws. It was the best way of getting back at him without needing to even lift a muscle. So on Monday, just 4 days ago, I waited till the pump flicked on and turned off the supply. Now, the way household tanks work in my country is that there's a ball valve in the tank which detects the level of water and turns on the pump. If the level doesn't increase, the valve stays open, which electronically sends a signal to the pump to stay on until the level gets to a point at which the valve closes and also shuts off the pump. However, the level wasn't increasing, and anyone knows that starving a pump of water isn't a good idea. This way, my expectation was that I'd burn out his pump and cause issues with his tenants. What I didn't account for is that his pump running constantly would mess up the fuses by constantly drawing power overnight and absolutely destroy his wiring. If he decided to upgrade his household wiring to a more modern standard, this would have been prevented. This house clearly still had 90s era wiring. At around 3 a.m., I heard all residents in the house waking up and talking in hushed voices about why just their house in the neighborhood doesn't have power or water. I found out about the power part because the tenants devolved into shouting at their landlord. Our tenant protection laws are very important, and power and water are classed as essential even on a state level. Cutting those services are grounds for lawsuits, unless due to weather or some other unavoidable reason. In this case, the landlord is responsible for keeping the house wiring up to date and in good condition, alongside the supply of water. So the tenants were not happy, and one of them immediately moved out 2 days later when it was informed that water and power will not be returning the very same day this happened. Both tenants in the 2 floors lodged a complaint with the police, and if a person is in clear breach of laws, the police have the authority to fine or penalize the person without a court judgment. It can be challenged in court if the person thinks that they were unfairly penalized, but they still have to pay the fines and will only be refunded if and when the court finds the fines unlawful. So now, the landlord lost both tenants and has to pay a fine of $500, which is a lot of money in our country. He also has to refund the security deposits of both tenants and cannot rent out until both issues are fixed, which will cost him more money. As of right now, he's moving out on Sunday to his daughter's place since he cannot afford to live alone. The tenants were his only source of income, and he's a retired mechanic, so he has no other income. He did find out why the motor kept drawing power, overloaded the wiring, and burned out. He came by to my gate and asked me if I turned off my water, and I said, "Oh yeah, my tank had a new leak on a pipe and I turned it off till the next day until the plumber came by to fix the issue." Y'all, the look on his face. He kept a straight one, but I just knew he was holding back. He just said, "Oh, okay," and went back inside. Not sure if he knows I know, but I don't care because he can't do anything. I'm getting a plumber down next week to correct my plumbing and remove any pipes that leave my property. So I got rid of my water issue and a neighbor who could potentially be a pain in the ass by simply flicking a tap off. 2 birds, 1 stone, I'd say. TLDR. Bought an abandoned house, neighbor was siphoning water from my supply. Turned off my water supply when the motor was running. Motor burned out the wiring in the house and cut off water and power to him and his tenants. Tenants lodged police complaints and the landlord got fined. Is now destitute and forced to move in with his daughter. Gas thief revenge, I was told this belonged here, so I'm reposting. Had a neighbor that would walk into my backyard, take my gas can of gas from my mower and put it in his car and mower and then return the can. I found this out because I had begun to a little suspicious that this 5-gallon can was always nearly empty every time I went to mow the lawn, and it was only like a 1-quart tank on the lawnmower. This was back before cheap, easy security cameras, so I had to set up a webcam for my laptop with motion detection software. Caught the guy going into the backyard literally 5 minutes after I left the house. For the next week, every time I had to take a piss, I pissed in that gas can. Now, full of piss, but still smells enough like gas to fool an idiot. Then I left it on the back patio again. Made a big show of checking the fluids in my car, packing a few bags. Made sure the neighbor knew I was getting ready to go on a trip and I'd be gone a while, hoping he takes the bait. I come back home in about an hour. Car trouble. The thief is in his front yard pulling the rope on his lawnmower so hard. It looks like he's going to have a stroke, turning bright red and cursing. Later, he gets in his car, makes it a couple blocks up the road, and it suddenly breaks down. I check the gas can on my patio, empty. Also, I just wanted to add, this guy was a huge piece of crap. That's not the only thing he did. I found out he had arrest warrants, so I ended up getting him arrested by applying for a sheriff's ride along program in his name. I used theatrics to spite my bully. He was pretty dramatic about the whole thing. TLDR at the bottom. Prelude. When I was a young man of just 18, I got a job in the Canadian oil patch. It was my first real job. It was the early 2000s, and this paid $20 per hour with no experience or education required. Min wage was sub $6. It was called well testing. Basically, you hook up a closed pressure tank and flare stack to new oil and gas wells, then flow them, gather data for the oil barons. It's hard work setting up and tearing down, but the rest is recording gauges and computer work. Not bad for a first job, except for fucking Gary. You work 2-man, 12-hour, or 4-man, 24-hour crews. 1 laborer and 1 supervisor a shift. I was paired with a mean-spirited alcoholic in his mid-50s named Gary. He was overweight and lazy, only helping with things too heavy to lift on my own, like 250-pound pipes. He spent his days in the trailer for the most part anyway, watching DVDs, napping, and hourly typing a bit of data into a PC. He also liked picking on me with jokes, insults. I'm not a small man, about 6 feet 1 inch in heels. He was noticeably smaller, yet while not physically intimidated, back then I lacked confidence and have a baby face. I got called stupid a lot. When he found out I had never used a power drill, he asked me, "Didn't your dad teach you anything?" I made the error of telling him my dad was only in my life a handful of years. The next time I made a mistake, he quipped, "No wonder my dad walked out on me." I did call him out on that. Like every other asshole alive, he'd tell me I couldn't take a joke. We always worked far out of town in the country. I often had to eat dinner with him in small town restaurants. Mostly bars if we could help it. He drank a lot, could actually be personable when not at work, and he was at least too deep. He didn't stop and drank every night. It quickly became the case that I drove us to work in his truck. He made $1 or $1.10 per kilometer, and we could drive 100 to 350 kilometers per day, every day for weeks. 100 miles equals 160 kilometers FYI. I got minimum wage for travel time. He was hungover most mornings, didn't want to drive, and told me he was boss. He slept like a gin-bloated corpse until we got to work. I worked with him for 3 months. 3 months of demeaning treatment and verbal abuse. I don't react much. It's still true, everyone has their breaking point. I was very used to bullying by then. Long story, I just get silent. I also needed the job. I don't anything until I do, and I don't do nothing forever. Part 1. The Power of Love. The first step in my quest for vengeance was remembering that it's impossible to defeat evil with the power of love. Part 2. The Power of Terror. One night, while we out of town on a job, during dinner, I mentioned to Gary it's pretty lame. He sleeps most of the time while I drive his truck and he gets paid. Maybe he ought to kick a few bucks my way for the effort. He didn't like my suggestion he'd be generous. The last hinge must have crumbled because he came unglued. More verbal abuse, and I was young, it actually reduced me to angry tears. When he threatened my job, it was a bad feeling, so I resolved to at least get away from him. I'd been taking notes because I wanted a different crew anyway. My breaking point was achieved. This is usually when my instinct for self-preservation diminishes and impulsive thoughts have fewer safeguards. I wanted to go home. Not revenge, but serendipity delivered the next morning. Gary was once again in his travel coma and I drove us to work. About 30 kilometers from side of the highway on a pullout was a semi-truck. Luck would also have it, it was running and trucker was outside his rig. I quickly formulated a plan. Gary always needed to be woken with intent, so he didn't stir when I stopped, got out and asked the friendly driver for a favor. Trucker man agreed to my terms, got back in his semi to await the signal. Gary, blissfully sleeping off the last of his nightly whiskey, also failed to notice when I maneuvered his truck. Parking it, we were nearly bumper to bumper facing the big beautiful Peterbilt. I lit the beacon. The truckers of Rohan answered with their own headlights. Like the horn of Helm Hammerhand, sounding in the deep, the trucker hit his air horn with amazing commitment to instilling fear. I did my part by honking Gary's truck gleefully in respite and screaming my ass off. I cried bloody murder at blast level and yelled, "Fuck, we're gonna die." Striking like a battalion of bombers singing a chorus of fire, the glorious cacophony lasted less than a minute. When it hit him, Gary dented the ceiling. Good thing he's thick as cement, or that might have hurt. He rocketed up with such force because the amount of shit he rapidly expelled into his pants kept him in debt to his own bowels until retirement. The wonderful sound of his anguished howls segued quickly into apoplexy and rage. While coming to terms with what I had done, he couldn't correctly choke out his death threats. I reversed, peeled off before he decided to get out to make good and gave the trucker a wave. I got about 10 meters down the road when Gary felt the need to tell me he had dangerously high blood pressure and I could have killed him with a stroke. About 4 years later, I went to paramedic school. So yes, in hindsight, I agree with his assessment. Sucks for him at 18, I had legitimately no idea what a stroke was. What would I even do? Probably ignore him like they did with Stalin. I think he was just extra hungover, or being lazier than usual by pretending half his body was paralyzed. Dead. I started laughing and told him he should probably calm down then. I said, "Can't you take a joke?" He kept making incomplete threats and I just couldn't stop laughing, making it even funnier when he wouldn't shut up. Don't feed it, Gary. I love ugly laughing at angry people. I was a hyena. He was fighting the urge to kill me and the desire to not stroke out simultaneously. The struggle was real. It took about 20 minutes more to get to site. That dance continued the whole time. I even asked him if that was his normal shade of red. Arriving, he ordered me to get out, said I was fired, then stomped off to go call the company owner. Whatever. I had intermittent chuckles and smoked cigarettes while savoring my Pyrrhic victory for the 4 hours it took the company owner to come pick me up. It was a medium-sized business, about 100 employees. He was the GM as well. I got some details. Gary wanted to involve the cops for attempted murder. Boss dissuaded him. Gary told one hell of a tale that left me looking like Satan. So I told him all about the necessity of Gary's punishment on the way back to the city. He had a good chuckle about it. He was actually a decent guy. I worked for him until I went back to school. I got moved to a different crew where I could be the lone sociopath. That's about it. I did get some street credit with the rest of the boys at the company. TLDR. I tricked my work bully into thinking he was dying in a motor vehicle collision with a semi-truck.